Welcome back to another Monster Hunter tutorial. Today we're going to talk about the Charge Blade. This is a very fun weapon to use in my opinion, and it is also one of the most complicated weapons in this entire series. So let's keep it simple and get right into it. So let's go over our basic attacks really quick. Our Y attack is just some slashes, and you notice the spinning slash. If you input any attack, you can then hit a direction and B, and it will do the same spinning attack with some movement. You can go left, right, backwards, and forwards with this attack. And then let's look at our B attack. So our B attack is actually going to be what is filling our files up there. That is the part of our gauge that is glowing yellow right now. The one directly to its left is the shield, as well as the axe head, which we'll get into later. This has an alternate form. And then the sword on the left of that shield is going to be able to be charged as well. So as you can see, we have three different things that we are going to be charging and filling up, but there's actually a fourth piece that we can look at, which is another way to play this weapon. So let's talk about filling our gauge. So you'll notice right now it is yellow. That means if we choose to fill our files right now, it will only fill 3 of them. If we keep hitting with our sword, it is going to increase the files that we can charge at one time. The yellow is going to be 3, like I said, and once we move into red with enough damage, it is going to fill all of the files. And the reason I say all of the files instead of 5, because the capacity boost skill increases the amount of files that we have on this weapon, and it maxes them out instead of filling only 5 at red and leaving the extra ones unfilled. So let's look at the easiest way to fill our files. So we've gone over the Y attacks. Those are good filler moves for in between this next attack, which is pretty important. You'll notice if I hit B, it says charge, and then it does a charged rising slash. So as you can see, it doesn't really look like I'm charging anything. So as it says charge, we just hold down B, and if we hold it for too long, it will do the exact same thing. Here we can see the damage. If I don't hold it, it'll just be 32, and if I overhold it, if I hit the barrel, it is 32. So now let's look at the right timing. So as soon as our elbow comes all the way back and the stance locks, we are going to release. As you can see, it hit a double slash and it looked a little bit stronger, so we're going to be using that from here. We have yellow files, so getting up to red isn't going to take too long. It should only take maybe one full charge attack. So let's hold down B, and as you can see, I did a lot more damage. My files are now red, so let's talk about filling our gauges. So if you hit guard with this weapon, this is a big shield. This is not as heavy of a shield as the lance, but it is heavier than the sword and shield, and I believe heavier than the great sword. So we'll hold guard, and then we'll hit B. This is going to charge files, and from there we can also charge our sword, but we will go over that later in the charging. So now that we have charged files, there's a few things we could do. We can actually keep attacking with the sword, and it will put us into yellow, and then red. Now you'll notice if you keep attacking with the sword, the sharpness is now glowing red. The blade looks like it is overheated. There's energy around the hilt, and the files are also blinking red. This means that any attack that you do with your sword now is going to be deflected. It still does some damage, but clearly not as much as you want to, and it also is going to drain your sharpness. So now that we have our files overcharged, we can either charge them again, or what we can do is start filling our gauges. So before we start filling our gauges, we need to do this from axe mode. So we are now in axe mode by hitting guard and then Y. This is going to morph us into axe mode, and now you'll notice it is a little bit heavier. We're moving slower, but with the lack of mobility comes stronger attacks. So with our Y attacks, we have a rising slash and then an overhead, and then it will just repeat those same 2 attacks without any extra inputs. You'll notice if we hit forward and Y, we will then do a dash slam, rising, and then after the overhead, we can then do the same attack moving forward. So if we throw in our B attacks, this is going to be one of the few ways that we can actually use our files. So you'll notice I hit B, 113 plus a 16, so files are going to do a little bit of extra damage on a second tick, and you notice with every B attack it is actually going to be using a file. So this move right here is the 3rd B attack, and it's going to be an amped elemental discharge. Alternatively, from the sword mode, you can activate the exact same attack by YB, YB, and YB. And again, from axe mode, that was just YB, so that's going to be your elemental discharge. And you'll notice all my files are gone. So your Y attacks in the axe mode you can use and not lose any files, but the B attacks are going to lose files. Let's talk about filling all of our gauges. One of the best things to do is to make sure you fill your files and then try to get them up to red again so that you have some ready for your next attacks. So from axe mode, we can do that elemental discharge, and it will actually require an input in the middle of this attack. So there's two different things we can do. We're going to talk about the right trigger first, because that is going to be where a lot of our power is going to come from. So if we look at YB and then right trigger, in the middle of the attack, we come out of axe mode, we end our elemental discharge. It throws us into sword mode, and you notice on the left of my files, up in the gauge area, the shield is now glowing pink. Again, this is why I said it was a good idea to have files up to red already, even if you've already charged them, because now, as soon as we ended that attack, we've used all of our files, so we can immediately recharge them. Having files is going to be pretty important for this next turn of attack, because as the shield is now glowing red, you'll notice with the weapon, this actually becomes the axe head on our weapon. So the shield slash axe head is glowing red, so that means we're going to do a little bit more damage. So, with that being said, we now actually have a different attack animation for the elemental discharge. You'll notice all of the other attacks are the same. I'm not going to use any files on the B attack to show you because I need the files for this next attack. You don't need all of the files, but the more files you have, the more damage you'll do. So let's talk about our elemental discharge. So if you hit YB, we're now actually going to do a super amped elemental discharge, I believe it's called. So let's go ahead and use our super amped elemental discharge. We can do the same thing, end it early with right trigger, but this is kind of the attack that we're going to want to be spamming. So again, to get here, you're just going to want to charge all the way up to red, fill, red again, and there's a few different ways that you can go into the discharge, but I like to use this one because it's easy, and then fill again, and now you'll notice that we can do the exact same thing and hit our super amped elemental discharge. So with that being said, let's talk about the sword gauge on the left of the shield. So you do not need to be actually charging files for this, but it is going to be in the charge file animation. Whilst we have our shield charged, we're going to guard. We're going to charge our files by hitting B while we're guarding, and then we're going to hold down Y. So once the sword is thrusted all the way through the shield, we're releasing it, and it is actually going to do a little bit more damage now. So guard, B, hold down Y, sword is in, and release. Condensed elemental slash is what that is called, and it is going to do extra damage for you. You'll notice here my file type is a power elemental file. The only other file type there is impact files. That is going to make it so that your files do stun damage, and you'll notice I'm not using files with this, but the file type is going to affect what happens with your sword. So if I have elemental, I'm going to do bonus elemental damage. If I had impact, these attacks with the sword, that second tick, is actually going to do stun damage. Our blade is overheated, so let's charge. Hold down Y, release, and it is charged. We're pretty much maxed out on our gauges now. As you can see, the sword, the shield is glowing, and the files are white. The shield doesn't last very long. The old games using this super amped elemental discharge would get rid of your shield buff, but now in this game it is actually on a timer so that we can use multiple discharges and keep filling our files to do more. Now you will notice with the fourth alternate mode I'm going to talk about really quick, it does require files. So we're going to go in, charge our files, and now what we can do is actually hit left trigger in the middle of our discharge. So as you can see, the shield looks buffed again, and we can actually do piercing damage now. So this is called Savage Axe mode, and they took this away in Monster Hunter Rise. It is not the same thing anymore. It is a silk bind, but they do have a weaker version of it. It's just probably not the most optimal thing, but I will go over that in my Monster Hunter Rise guides since that is now coming to console. So as you can see with Savage Axe mode, I'm actually losing files over time. I'm not even using any B attacks and they're going away. And that is because the core mechanic of the Savage Axe mode is that you need files. So notice here, if I decide to dump them all, my Savage Axe mode will immediately go away. I have no files, Savage Axe mode is gone, and now I am back to square one. So the cool thing about this is that you don't even need your shield charged to activate Savage X mode, but it does do a lot more damage because, again, activating your shield will increase your axe head damage too. So here, let's look at this. 222 attack, so 222 attack. Now let's look at this. 236. So as you can see, it wasn't a whole bunch of damage, but the damage difference does rack up quite a bit whilst you're continuously fighting a monster. Something else to mention is that same YB shield thrust will actually do the same file type damage as your sword and your files will do. So this is an elemental one, so if I shield thrust, it'll do some bonus elemental damage. Again, if this was an impact file type, the charged sword, the files, and the shield thrust are all going to do stun damage. So let's talk about guarding and guard points. There's a few areas that we can actually do guard points. So you'll notice here, this is what a normal block would look like. I'm holding guard, and it doesn't throw me back too far. Let's wait for our bomb. Now watch what happens here if I morph. So as you can see up there in the button inputs, it says sword morph slash. That means I tried to do this attack and morph into axe mode, but it blocked instead. There's a few different guard points. I don't actually know where all of them are. So I know there's one when you come out of axe mode and go back into sword mode, and it will look like this. I didn't time that very well, but it's still procced. So as you can see, the windows for this is actually pretty forgiving. But again, one of the most popular is trigger Y as soon as you go to get attacked, and it will actually do damage to the monster whilst guard pointing. Let's go ahead and talk about the weapon type. So, when we grapple to a monster, we're going to be tenderizing it. This is a heavy weapon, and you'll notice that as soon as we grapple and attack, it will automatically throw us into axe mode. The other thing to know about this weapon is that pressing Y will come out into sword mode, and for alternate modes you can press trigger to come out in the secondary mode. For example, switch axe also does this going into sword mode, where you can hit trigger and it will automatically go into sword mode. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these skills. Alright, so just like the Lance and Gun Lance, we're going to talk about all of our guard skills because those are pretty good to have on the Charge Blade. So, Offensive Guard is going to be especially helpful since you have guard points, and this is going to make it so that when you hit guard points or even guard on its own, it's going to boost your attack up to 15%, as I talked about in my last videos with the Offensive Guard skill. This is an incredible attack increase, so it does not last too long, but most attack increases are up to around 25 points in attack, where this is 15%, which is a very high number when you get into the higher attack weapons, considering in endgame most of these do over 1,000 attack at their base. Focus might be another one that you want to look into, as this is going to affect both your gauge fill rate, which is your files, as well as the B attack to charge your files. Obviously, we're going to talk about guard. Guard is going to massively decrease the impact of attacks and reduce stamina depletion by 50% at level 5. So this is going to be really helpful. This is probably with the shield gauge charge. This is probably going to put this weapon on par with the lance guarding. Power Prolonger might be another one that you want to look into, especially because the duration of the gauges isn't super long, and this will not affect Savage Axe mode since that relies solely on the file count. So again, Guard Up is going to be the skill that makes unblockable attacks blockable. That's going to be pretty helpful for the Charge Blade, so definitely look into that if you want that. It is a 1-point skill, so that's always nice to be able to slot into your armor sets. So Capacity Boost is going to be a pretty good skill to have on. I use this on my sets. It's going to increase your file capacity +1. So the only downside is that it only increases the file by 1, but it is a 1-point skill and it will be doing an extra tick of damage for your amp discharge. Last but certainly not least is going to be the artillery skill. This is going to increase the power of our file attacks by 30% at level 3, and it does have a secret, so it's going to go up to 50% at level 5 if we have the set bonus. So the Raging Brachydios set has artillery secret and artillery level 5 that'll be worth looking into, especially since this is such a great set with Agitator 7 as well. This has the Agitator and the artillery secret, so this is a really good set to be using for Charge Blade. Artillery is definitely a skill that I recommend running with this. It is going to just flat out increase your attack, so this is going to be probably higher on the priority list for skills, and if you have the slots for it, you can pair this skill with the Slugger skill. if you have an impact charge blade to be able to knock out a little bit easier. And of course for the Urigan armor set we have guard up that bonus. So that's going to do it for the charge blade, the most complicated weapon in here. I hope I made that a little bit easier for you guys. You're just going to want to be able to charge your vials, put it into your shield, and then do some super amp discharge. You can even play without charging your sword or going into Savage Axe mode at all. That's usually what I do. I don't do my sword and Savage Axe a whole bunch, but I do personally like this weapon a lot, especially the Black Eagle charge blade, which is a community design. So let's go ahead and look at some gameplay.